Welcome to the Firehouse Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation. I'm one of your hosts, Peter McKenzie, retired fire captain with the City of Ventura Fire Department, and my co-host, Jason Kay, active battalion chief with the City of Ventura Fire Department. We are going to bring awareness to real issues that face firefighters and their families. We want you to feel like you have a seat at the kitchen table, which every firefighter knows is the heart of the firehouse. Let's get right into the episode.
Hi, this is Joe from Ventura Fire Foundation. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I want to do a quick plug for the September 11th Memorial Stair Climb, this year being held on September the 7th. We're looking for climbers, sponsors, volunteers. If you want to sign up for any or all of those things, you can go to our website, venturafirefoundation.org, or click the link in the show notes. And please remember to subscribe and review the show. It really helps us to build our audience. Thanks so much.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Firehouse Roundtable. Today, I am joined by a couple women. One of them is my favorite person, and I just threw myself right into the lion's den because I figured we're going to do some couples shows. So welcome to the show, Stephanie K.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. They said, who should do a couples show together with a couples therapist? And I said, for sure, my relationship is perfect, so I don't need any of that. And then everybody else on the board said that means you should probably have that immediately. So anyway, I said, let's do this. And a friend of the show, Maggie Hernandez, is back with us. She's a repeat guest. We're happy to have her back. Maggie, before we get too deep into the show, give us a little bit of a review and kind of who you are and what you do in a brief statement.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back. It's a privilege to be here. So my name is Maggie Hernandez. I'm an associate marriage and family therapist. I'm based here in Ventura. I'm also married to an active duty firefighter paramedic for the city of Pasadena, who was on the previous episode with me. I specialize in working with first responders, trauma survivors, and I live the life that I work with. My clients have the same life as I do, basically. And we're all trying to figure out how to make this first responder lifestyle work in the best way possible. I've got a couple of kids. My daughter just turned 8. My son just turned 6. So we're juggling that. We're juggling a dog, about 8 chickens, and chaos all the time around here. Yeah.
Yeah. Steph, I should probably let you give a little bio on yourself too. Why don't you tell our audience who you are, what you do, how long we've been married, and kind of your gig.
All right. So I'm Stephanie and been married to Jason for 20 plus years. And we have a few kids. They're all adults from 30 down to 23. And I went back to school like you did, Maggie, and got my nursing done. And now I get to be in the school setting. And it was fantastic to hear your last podcast. I have so many questions, and they're all relational. So they're all like kids. And the one thing that I grabbed onto was when you were with your husband and talking about, just a few minutes ago, we were fighting about my son's bad dream, and then how to take the therapist and the mom and the dad and how to commingle, and the way he deals with it and the way you deal with it. Oh my goodness. I was like a sponge, just wanting to hear all of the ins and outs and have so many questions to that. But yeah, that's who I am. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you. And here we go. Sorry, Jay.
I think we labeled that show When Your Therapist Is Your Wife, right? So that's got a bunch of connotations with it too. Maggie's doing a webinar for the foundation on August 13th. It's free. There'll be a way to sign up in the show notes and on venturafirefoundation.org. So we're excited to talk about maybe a little bit of intro on what you're going to do with that. That's going to specifically be on healthy relationships as a firefighter in general. So maybe hit on a little bit of that stuff, and we'll just kind of dialogue from there. And then we'll let Steph fill in with some of the questions she has from your last podcast.
I'm excited to hear your questions, Steph. So yeah, we're going to be talking about healthy relationships in August, talking a lot about how we talk to our partners, what we share with our partners, when we share it with our partners, how we can really support each other. This is not a normal lifestyle. I think we can all agree this is not for everybody. It takes a really special kind of person to live this life, both on the first responder side and on the partner side. So how can we really, work on our marriages, because they are a job as far as I'm concerned. And I encourage all of my people to think about it the same way. This is another job. So how can we dedicate, our time and our hearts to this other career, I suppose. And then if we've got kids in the mix and all of that, how do we balance everything? How do we deal with some of the resentments that come from being the primary parent, really? Because, let's be real, those resentments do exist. How do we find ways to maintain our sense of humor and manage our stress levels? Those are going to be some of the main topics that we'll talk about in August.
Okay, so there's no way I'm going to wait till August to talk about all that stuff. So let's talk about a little bit of it without ruining the whole webinar now. But give me some what to share and when to share. Those two, I think, were your first two. And I was like, okay, that's good. How much to share? And is there any kind of, when I'm talking to Stephanie, I come home from work and it's like, I don't know if she should hear all of this stuff. If you totally debrief with your wife, give me some healthy boundaries for that.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's going to depend on what your partner does, right? If your partner is a school teacher, maybe you don't want to tell them some of the gory details. If you've got, a partner who is a nurse, they might be a little more used to hearing some of the ins and outs of some of these calls that you're going on. I think the biggest thing, and one of the sexiest things ever, is consent, is asking your person, hey, I had a really shit call last night, or this one thing is really sticking with me. Do you have the capacity to take on a conversation right now? Are you able to be present fully for me? Because they might have their own stuff going on. My husband will ask me, is it okay if I share this thing with you that happened last night? And I may have just come out of 3 back-to-back EMDR sessions where I am holding space for some really deep, dark trauma. And I might have to tell him, I would love to hear what you have to say in 20 minutes. Is it okay if we wait for 20 minutes? Just so I have time to, get on the Peloton and do a quick ride so I can just, kind of sweat out whatever I took in for the day. Or, go outside and, I'm not kidding, pick up my emotional support chicken, Vienna, and walk around the backyard with her, just kind of check out my garden for a little while. That is one of my forms of self-care, just to kind of get myself to a good space so that my mind is right and we can talk about the things and I can be fully present for him because he deserves that. So yeah, get consent. Are they in an okay space to be able to have this conversation with you right now?
Yeah. What do you think about that stuff? Hey, get ready for this because this is kind of on my mind and it's a big deal and it's something to do with work. Because I know that I've come home and unloaded on you without asking. And sometimes you're like, hold on a second. I'm not totally available right now either. And I'm not, I got 4,000 things going on and I'm at school and I don't have time for this. And some kid just walked in with a bee sting. I got to go.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I love hearing about Jason's day. I love hearing specifics about Jason's day. I love hearing about step by step, the gory details, how you navigated it, how your people navigated it, and then what the end result was. So I love holding space for Jay. I think over the years, that has been really fun and good for us. And then I think timing is, man, if we would have known that 10, 15 years ago, that would have been amazing. Hey, timing is so key. And it's actually really respectful to your partner to give that, because I am going to say, absolutely. And then I need to check myself and say, you know what? I can't wait to hear it. Give me an hour. Give me a half hour. When I get home, just let me walk around the backyard or take a walk with the dog. So that is fantastic. I like it a lot.
It's funny too, because I used to tell you way more as a new paramedic, and then you would beg me for more about each call. And I was like, I'm good. Like I wasn't as involved as a captain. And now our son is a new firefighter. So Steph and him end up having that conversation because she still wants to hear way more about the calls. And I'm kind of more, I'm out. And that's a whole different life change for us as our kids got older, and it wasn't come home and you guys have to deal with 2 or 3 kids running around the house and you don't have time to unload. So what do you do? Most of our listeners probably have younger kids than Steph and I do at this point. What do you do when you have just this full plate and full brain and you come home and you don't have the capacity, whether it's lack of sleep or whatever terrible call that is in your head from the day before, and you walk in the door and there is no time? You need to be either go time with the kids or you have nobody to decompress with.
Oh, I really love working with my clients on what's your reentry process. Can you find a way to kind of leave work at work as much as possible? We all know it comes home with you, but can you find a way to like kind of reenter and occupy we've talked about, I think the last episode that I was on, we talked about the work self and the home self. How can you occupy your home self in a more meaningful way? How can you leave your work self behind a little bit, again, as much as is possible? I try to have routines with all of my clients. My guys all will recognize, hey, can you take a shower before you come home? Can you maybe, if you can't take a shower or if you've got a long drive, maybe just like buy a really nice nail brush and like wash your hands really well before you go home. And imagine yourself really just letting that place wash off of you. So that, when you do get home, you're maybe a little bit more ready to jump back into home life. Because, sometimes you are kind of getting hit by a Mack truck when you walk in the door. I know my husband feels that way sometimes when, the dog is meeting him in the driveway and then the kids are tearing out of the house going, "Daddy, daddy, daddy." And he'll come to me later in the day and say, that was a lot for me. That was maybe let's not do that again. Yeah. So, and then letting me know, I think that's something that's been really helpful for us, so personal experience. And then something I encourage my folks to do as well is if you have a lot to talk about, if you've got a lot going on that you do need some support around, letting your partner know, hey, I recognize we can't talk about it right now. As soon as we have some time and you have some like space for me, I'd like to have a conversation. I want to share something that happened or something I'm concerned about.
I like that. Physically do a routine to leave work, wash work off of you. I like that. That's cool. What were you going to say, Steph?
Yeah.
Visualizing. So if you can't take a shower, do something that you can visualize washing away, resetting. Because you're going to have that 18-hour brain. You're still going to be in that space. But I love that visualization of wash it away. I'm going home. Wash it away. That was really good.
Yes.
So one of the things you mentioned was EMDR. We touched a little bit on it last time. I think a lot of our listeners, myself and Steph included, absolutely have been to therapy and promote therapy. And at what point do you look for something more specialized like EMDR? At what point do you go, there needs to be something more than just kind of a therapist and on one, or a therapist and a couple, or how does that work and kind of how does it play out?
Okay. It's a great question. EMDR is, so here, first of all, talk therapy is incredible. I do probably even split, I think, right about now. With the clients I've got right now of talk therapy and EMDR supportive counseling, it's a beautiful thing when the relationship is great between the client and the therapist. EMDR is something that I every one of my clients knows is available to them. It's something where I tell them I'm EMDR trained. I am going through the process right now of becoming certified, which is just more of an in-depth kind of knowledge base that I'll have at the end of that. But it's something that, again, it's on the menu. Whether or not you ever want to do it is a whole other question. But I will recommend, if I have a client who comes in and says, hey, I'm noticing that I'm having a lot of flashbacks, or I was on this call and it really reminded me of something that happened, and then it reminded me of something else, and then I'll hear a pattern and I'll say, we can EMDR that. So I'll usually put it out there. But it's really, when I'm seeing more complex stuff than just, hey, I want to talk about X, Y, and Z, then I'll start to kind of put it out there and say, maybe we should look at something a little more in depth for this, rather than just talking about it. And really, at the end of the day, EMDR is so effective because it doesn't re-traumatize folks. You're not telling me every gory detail of everything that happened. You're telling me, pictures or emotions or things that are coming up for you. And then we just go with that and we go right back into that bilateral stimulation. So we're doing our best to not re-traumatize you by talking about it.
So is that specifically PTSD therapy?
EMDR is probably one of the most effective forms of treatment for trauma. Yes.
And then just remind everybody what the acronym is. Eye movement.
Oh, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So, it uses bilateral stimulation either through like auditory means. You can use your eye movement, like side to side eye movement. You can do tapping, kind of like butterfly tapping. I have some clients who will tap their knees. The whole idea is kind of rooted around our brains are really wired for optimal mental health. And what happens with trauma is it's almost like I compare it to someone taking a plate and dropping it on the floor and it fragments. Our brains can't really make sense of it. So when we do try to recount something that is a traumatic event in our lives, our brains can go into this, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all of the Fs. And our brain no longer is functioning in a way that is cohesive. We tend to go to we default to the lizard brain, call it the lizard brain. So our amygdala kicks in and it starts driving the bus. So we go into that trauma response. Makes it really, really difficult for us to stay present. So what EMDR does is through that bilateral stimulation, keeps your brain online, all parts of your brain online, so that you can't default to that trauma response, so that you can fully process what has happened.
My brain's going crazy. Sorry. I have so many questions.
No follow-up?
That was a lot too. Sorry.
Yeah, and
No.
It was a lot.
It was good to remind everybody what EMDR stood for. And I think we touched on it last time, and I would love to deep dive into that maybe on another show with you too. You said before that you got to think about your marriage as a job, and that seems very industrial to me. And my immediate response is to fight back on that and go, this is supposed to be something pleasurable, I guess, in my life, and to relieve stress and not just add stress to it. And I know that there are times where marriage it feels like just more stress. So what is it that we should be relying on our partner for, depending on our partner for, as opposed to what is it we need to be able to say, this is on me? So obviously there's a difference between dumping on Stephanie and having her as my partner in my life and sharing things with Stephanie. So can you touch on that maybe a little bit from how much to rely on her to take care of it for me versus how much is kind of like, I need to figure this out? Because I do feel like there's been times where I dump on Steph and she's like, that's not really for me to take care of. That's almost, a codependent type thing where you got to deal with that yourself. When it comes to being a firefighter too, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that this is heavy on me, and some of it I share with her and I go, you help me fix things, so help me fix that. Right? Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yes. I'm really big on saying, with my couples especially, it's like, that sounds like a you thing. That doesn't sound like a her thing, and vice versa. Knowing what is your stuff to own is very, very important. And I really try to encourage that with all of my clients of, wait, that doesn't sound like yours. Are you sure that that's something you should be taking responsibility for? Yeah, like kind of not not know your know which lane you're supposed to be in, but really, I mean, know what's yours to own and what's not. We're not responsible for our partner's emotions. We are responsible for how we show up for them. And how much we can help them like be able to process stuff, but sometimes we're not in a great place either. But yeah, I think when I say marriage is a job, I didn't mean to cause stress for you, Jason, but I mean it takes that level of commitment. I mean, and really it's not something where I'm going to get into this and we're going to see what happens kind of a thing. But I think marriage deserves that level of attention, that when you're in a job where, I mean, firefighting is not, this is, you clearly love what you do to do what you're doing. You're away from your family, you've got crazy commitments that you've got at work. So I like to remind people, you clearly love that, and you're putting the time in to achieve excellence there. Your marriage deserves the same level of attention. So when I say that it's a job, that's really what I'm saying more than anything.
And we've talked over the years about how we see it, like the perception of how I see it versus how you see it might be very different. And the different stages in our relationship, having little kids and how I see it and how you see it can be very different. So it's been a struggle at times over the years. I've always felt like I have the capacity to listen and love and tackle. I am here to help. And it really did spiral me into codependency on a big level. I remember my daughter saying, Mom, just because you put flowers and perfume, there's still eggshells under there. And we really had to talk about perception.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it was on me to go, he is amazing and capable, and I'll just take care of it. No, stop. We're good partners, and your job is heavy, and you do a lot, and you do provide. I'll take care of the rest. No, stop. So there was a time where really had to tackle how each of us sees where we're at, where we're going to go, how to do this together. And thank goodness for these new 18-hour brain and timing. To debrief in the right timing and getting permission, which means I respect you and I respect your time and what you do. So I'm sorry for going on, but this has been something that we've really tackled, took us down, and brought us, back out of it. So I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many of those codependent patterns are really established when we're younger, of let me just try to fix all of the things for you, because maybe we were parentified at an early age, or, I look at things a lot through an internal family systems lens. So what was going on in your life where you were taught that like perfectionism and people pleasing is the right way to do things? There's that preemptive fixer part. I don't love that part. It doesn't really work for everybody in the relationship. Because it doesn't make for a good partnership. And it also doesn't allow the pleaser or the, perfectionist to really be in touch with their own needs, like their core self. Like we are all fully capable of being able to manage our own stuff. So, but we were probably taught at an earlier age that that's not the thing you do.
You're spot on. I was the oldest, and really managing, like, I want to make sure my mom's happy. I want to make sure my dad, I'll take care of my sister. So yeah, you are spot on. And to do the work, I love that you actually call marriage a job, because through the good, the bad, the hard, the ugly, you come out. Relationships are our privilege. Relationships are a gift, but they do take watering and changing pots and new perspectives and new light and less light. So
Yes. Yes. Yeah. They're not a set it
Firefighters
and
are
forget it
fixers.
kind of thing. Oh gosh, yes. Don't
Yeah.
I know it?
You touched on that a second ago, and that is not a great trait to have in relationships. And Steph and I, through a bunch of therapy in our own relationship over the years, she's not here for me to fix, and that's what we do as firefighters. I'm going to point out where you're wrong, and then I'm going to fix it for you, and that's not okay. And I think a lot of us who grew up in the 80s and a little bit earlier than that, you have these 50s and 60s parent style who said the man provides and the woman is subservient, and that's what we're taught. And we grew up with this Cinderella type of what's marriage is supposed to be. And I think it's terrible for society that that's what they're taught. And we had to kind of unlearn that together in the early years in our relationship in order for us to be okay. So having Steph on, I want to kind of keep it on that couples and spouse. So talk a little bit about secondary trauma and what part of when I come home, what do I present to her? And how does she deal with that after I present something to her? Because now I kind of let go of everything that I had and dumped it onto her, but there's nobody for her to go to unless you have maybe a therapist. Is that where you come into, or what do you think about that?
Yes, that is where I come in. But I think, really, I try to encourage all of my firefighters to have someone else that they can talk to who's not always their partner. Yes, I do want you to be able to talk to your partner. My husband has his brother who is a captain now for LA City. They can talk about anything, all the gory details, anything that he doesn't want to tell me, he can do that. That's great. His mom was my husband's mother was a respiratory therapy nurse for years. And so he would talk to her and he would just call her on the way home and say, all right, lady, here's what happened. Here's what I need to kind of debrief on. So that when he came home, he could be fully present. He could be 100% there for me. And yeah, we would still talk about calls, but it wouldn't necessarily be every little in and out of stuff. So I really do encourage people to have an outside support, someone who's in the same field, who can be there for you, who gets it. And then, really, more than anything, I think, and something that, I think we all struggle with as partners, how do we show up for you without taking on the trauma, but letting you know that we're there? And I think some of the most powerful conversations that Eric and I have been where he has come home and talked about a call. I remember one, and he was really upset about it. I don't remember all of the details, but there was a child involved and he was just a mess and just crying. And these are the calls that get to everybody. He was crying and then I immediately started crying and he said, I'm sorry. And I said, no. I'm a sympathetic crier. This is okay. This is me showing you that I'm here with you. I'm 100% present. You're not hurting me. You're not traumatizing me. Like I'm here. Just know that I'm here. I think being able to tell our person, like, I'm fully here and present and listening to you, that can be such a gift for the person who is having to unpack some really dark stuff.
Thanks for listening. This is Joe from Ventura Fire Foundation. We have an exciting lineup of free webinars for firefighter families in 2024. In August, Maggie Hernandez, Associate Marriage and Family Therapist and Firewife, will talk about how firefighter couples can maintain a healthy relationship. The webinars are open to fire families throughout the U.S. and will be held on Zoom. There are limited seats available though, so register soon. You can register on our website or through the link in the show notes. All of the webinars will be recorded and made available on our website and YouTube channel. Support from Vanguard Charitable made this series possible, and we thank them. Now back to the show.
I just heard a story from one of my guys the last couple of days who's going to therapy about some of the calls we run on, and he was talking about a terrible call that had to do with a child, and the child's parent wasn't treating him well. And then he saw somebody not treating his child well, and it was over the top anger, rage, and it all stemmed from because of what happened at work. So that's just, some of those things are so good to know you're not alone on, and it's okay. And here's where it comes from. I think that's important for the partner to know as well, and to kind of point that out. And if you can both be open to talking about stuff like that, and get some help where you need help, is kind of where I'm going with this. But I want to leave the floor open to Steph. Talk about some of your questions from the old podcast for Maggie, and then it looked like you wanted to elaborate on what I was saying on that.
Yeah, I said picking your village. So I like when you say, find people that you can debrief with. Find a village. I've seen over the years, I used to do ride-alongs with the fire department and went through the fire academy, and I have a really hard time sometimes with hearing, finding your village and making sure they're safe, that you find people that are going to allow you the space, whether it be about your marriage or calls or family or kids, but you find your village that is going to encourage health and safety of all of that. So many times, in fact, this is where, from the old podcast to now, asking you about when you have a support group where you have them all come in, how do you listen to them, allow them the space, hold the space for their reality, which can be really hard and difficult, and you want to have sympathy and yet leave them on a healthy note, rather than just allowing go spiraling into that deep, dark space, and not necessarily providing breath or life at the end of the conversation to end on an up note in the support group. How do you do that?
Ooh, support groups. I love groups, because when you have a really great group, and I'm very intentional on how I create a group and who is part of the group. When you get a really solid cohort together, it is so gorgeous to just watch the magic happen of people showing up for each other. There's actually not much that I do outside of psychoeducation when it comes to these kinds of groups, where everyone is gelling and someone will share something and then another person will say, I remember when I dealt with that too. Or someone else will come in and say, yes, I'm afraid of that. And being able to just show them, look at this community, look at this support that you have. You aren't going through this alone. Being able to really encourage these people to say, you're not dealing with this on your own. You're not, kind of just, it's not happening in a vacuum. You have people who have been through it before. You have people who are, they're going through it now. They're looking at maybe potentially going through it later, and they're worried about how are they going to get through. Support groups they're just phenomenal. A friend of mine who's also a therapist and a firewife at Pasadena, we're getting ready to start one in September, I believe is when we're going to kick it off, just for fire partners, so that we can give that space for partners to be able to talk about, gosh, my husband came home the other day and he was being a real tool, or, my kids are driving me absolutely crazy. Or, I'm pregnant right now and I had a really traumatic birth story the first time and I'm terrified about doing it this time. We're going to kind of cover all of those things. So being able really just to kind of provide I hesitate to say safe space, because I think in those safe spaces, you feel like you don't grow when you feel safe. I think you grow when there's room for you to actually exercise some bravery. So being able to create that really brave space for our folks, supportive and everything like that, that's the way to do it.
I'm always so afraid of bandwagging, people jumping on the bandwagon and I want to leave you better than I found you. And you're like, I'm changing course. I'm on a mission. The Maggie that was pre and the Maggie that is post education, because you have little ones too. Who do you parent differently now, knowing everything you know?
Yes. very differently. I think there were a handful of us in our cohort who at Pepperdine, we've just kind of, you're in the trenches together, and we've stayed really close since. But we would all talk about it in school. Gosh, this is making me a better parent. This whole thing, like I'm able to actually listen to my kids more. It's interesting because I've gotten a lot better at really breaking some old patterns that I had as a parent, which were carryover from my upbringing of, oh, come on, go ahead and get up. You're fine. No big deal. You're okay. Just brush it off. Of being able to, sit with my kids. My daughter absolutely ate it on her bike coming home from school a few weeks ago. And where I would have been like, okay, well, come on, let's get up, let's get going. And kind of rushed her home. I jumped off my bike and I sat with her and I said, I've got you. I've got you. I'm here. Mommy's here. I've got you. And I just held her for a while. And that's what I do every day. What a privilege to get to do my job. I have to say, I am so grateful to get to do this every day. There's nothing better than doing my job, but getting to do that for my kids too. I'm more capable to show up for my kids. I have more tools in my toolkit than I ever had before going back to school.
I think that is so important.
I love getting to do this
because we are alone a lot raising our kids. And I wish I knew now, kids will come into my office as a school nurse and it's elementary age. And when you look at them and you know that the injury was not just on their elbow or their knee, but how it happened and what it happened and how it made them feel, holding space for them and kind of diving into the hurt in their heart versus the hurt on their elbow.
Yes. That's so much of it.
So,
yeah.
So I think that what you said about spending time, kids know all the time the parents are super busy and we got to go. And it's such a loving notion to stop with your kid and go, I have time. Are you okay? We don't need to rush out of here. It doesn't really make a difference in life anyway. I think kids would notice that for sure. The other thing I wanted to touch on was Steph brought this up and you responded about it, but I know that, and I'll probably take some heat for this, but we're going down this road anyway. I know that there is a tendency, and we'll just say as the husbands do this, that'll be easier. So when we get together as a group of firefighters, and maybe it's totally different when the wives get together. I'm sure that it is. There is a tendency to trash talk, and then that builds up, and then it's hard to let that go, as opposed to continuing that banter of negativity. Do you have a way in your support group to go, okay, we've hit kind of the pinnacle. We're not going to continue to trash talk everybody around us. Now we're going to kind of move out of that time to helping each other, because we all want to get back to having a good marriage. We all know that we're not all going to leave the room and get a divorce tomorrow. Can we talk about how you can get to that point of going, okay, we empathized with each other. Now let's get back on the task here.
Yeah, it's not unlike how I approach the bandwagon kind of approach that Stephanie was talking about, where you have guys who are starting to kind of pile on. It's wow, what I'm hearing is there's a lot of support. People have had a lot of similar experiences. And really when it comes down to with the partners too, it's just saying, look, we're not here to talk our person. This is not what we do here. We're not here to just bash the person we committed to being with and supporting and loving and caring for. We're not going to do this about our partners. I've never really seen it happen in groups where, they just end up saying, oh, and then this happened and it really sucked. And then, oh, they did this and it was the worst. And then, oh, I hate it when they do that. There could be some of it, but then it's okay, wait, what I'm hearing is there's a lot of frustration around X, or what it sounds like is there's a lot of, it sounds like, wow, it sounds like someone is in a lot of pain right now about this one particular event. I wonder what it brought up for them. And then everyone else can kind of help, support that person and unpack it. There's definitely ways to derail it, because I'm not a fan of, we're not going to bandwagon on all of this stuff. Everyone's got their own pain, and it's not, let's compare trauma, We're here to support each other.
I
We're
like
here to
it.
learn the
So
tools.
we all love our partners, and paraphrasing what you said, make the issue the issue, right? Instead of the
Yes.
partner the issue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
I
never
like
the
that.
person. It's always, there's something else behind it.
When we talk about secondary trauma for the spouse, do you see that? Is that an issue?
What I see more than anything is not necessarily the secondary trauma, but the partner worrying that they're not showing up for their person in the way that their person needs. It's not so much the stories that they're hearing. It's that they told me this really difficult story and I could see them struggling. And I don't know if I really showed up for them the way that I needed to, or the way that they needed me to. So it's really, I see more of, I want to be able to be fully present for this person, let them know that I care deeply about them and care deeply about what they're going through and what they're feeling. But it's less about the trauma from what I see. I mean, I know it happens, and I know it's difficult. I do have some partners who have come in saying, oh, my husband told me about this call with a kid. It's always with a kid. And now I'm looking at my kids and I'm terrified that something like that could happen. And so, we unpack a lot of that. It's okay, well, what did that bring up for you? What emotions did that bring up for you? Most of the time it's fear, because that's powerful. And then how do we cope with that? What are, a lot of the work I do is around values. What are some of the values that are most important to you? Because fear really robs you of being present, right? And I know you want to be present for your family. So how do we, kind of not, how do we navigate the fear? I guess is probably the best way to put it. How do we navigate that fear so that we can still hold on to those values of being present for my family, being present for my relationships, being supportive, understanding how to kind of like ride the wave of those negative emotions like fear. It's a skill, and it's not easy to do because we really want to push against it with everything we have, myself included.
And I'll tell you that as a firefighter, on that, what you started that statement with of they really want to give their partner what they need. I forget exactly how you worded that, but that is the biggest gift of all of it. Like if when I'm unloading or debriefing to Steph, and if I know that her intention is to be able to be there and give her best to what she or I think that is the best case scenario, that means more than anything that she actually says. Just knowing that she wants to be fully present in there to give me what I need. So that was a cool statement.
I like to remind my couples all the time, wow, I'm hearing a lot of it sounds like you guys really love each other deeply and you're trying really hard to show up for each other. Neither of you knows how to do that just yet. And that's typically why they're, coming in to see me, is that there's a lot of love there. And I make sure to call it out at every possible turn. Whenever I notice it, it's, ooh, I'm hearing, this is maybe an uncommunicated need or, what have you. But I always make sure to note that these people are trying their best to show up for each other. And maybe they're just singing from different hymnals.
I like that. And lastly, I'll just chime in last part of it. I really like you talking about the values. It seems like if we could have talked about together, husband and wife, what are our values to come back to that, knowing that we're going to have different things going on. But if we can, almost like a mission statement for your family, you guys,
yes. Yeah.
Going through those values, how great that we agreed on these. Let's come back to that. And how can we make that happen?
Yes. Yeah. I like to remind my folks, I have just about everybody. We do a lot of values work. I love doing values work because I think that's how we're driven. We also don't spend a lot of time getting really clear on what our values are, just as individuals. But that's our why. That's why we're doing the things that we're doing, and that's why we maybe experience some distress if we're not living in line with our values. I like to remind my people, wait, hold on. What's your why? Because what I'm hearing, what I've heard you say around what your why is, and then what I'm seeing you do are two very different things. So which is it? And I like to say that I gently like to call people on their stuff.
Why?
And sometimes I'm a little more overt, just depending on the client. But yeah, it's being able to get everyone back in connection with wait, what's your why? Why are you here? Why are we doing
Maybe
this?
reestablishing them, because I know our why when we were raising kids can be very different now that we've had 20 years together, and a lot of things can change, and let's reevaluate our why, and that can actually be really cool.
Exactly. Yeah. I think kind of going back, my husband and I tried to go back and do our why. Like, I like that you called it a mission statement stuff. I think that's genius. But kind of reevaluating like every year. Okay, well, what are we looking at? What did we accomplish last year? Maybe things can shift a little bit. And it's not even necessarily like a New Year's resolution kind of a thing. I actually tend to do it around our anniversary. But it's okay, well, what did we accomplish in this last year? What do we want to look at doing this coming year? What are the things we can do to support each other to get there? What are the values that are going to be most important for us? What's going to drive us this year? It's so important to go back and actually get really clear on it together, because that's what's going to hold you together.
That sounds like a great place to end it. I'll leave it right there. So I'm going to give our audience, and specifically our couples, partners, audience, homework that I heard from you, Maggie, that I think would be super healthy to start with. Your values as a couple, what's your why, and then create a mission statement for the two of you, as Steph said. I think those are great. Any parting words? I do want to talk about, again, I'm going to say that we're going to do the webinar coming up August 13th with you. So I'm looking forward to that. Anything else, Steph or Maggie, that you guys want to hit on before we go?
I'd love to do a whole thing about kids.
Nothing for me.
Raising kids from littles.
Oh, yes.
And then when they hit puberty, and then when they're struggling and missing dad, and how to come up with,
Yeah.
Anyways, that's just I loved hearing the very first one with you, and thank you for coming on again. I cannot wait for the webinar the 13th. So Thank you.
No, I'm excited. Thank you so much. It's been such a privilege getting to chat with you both. And Stephanie, I'm so excited I got to meet you today.
All right, Maggie, good to talk to you. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
Well, that was a fun conversation with Maggie. Some of those conversations are so relatable to everything that they just come out really easily, and that was an easy conversation to have. It's always good to have somebody on who's relatable. She has a ton of experience with PTSD. She's a firefighter's wife. She's a Navy daughter. She checks all the boxes for all our listeners who can relate to all that. I always pull a couple tidbits out from my favorite parts of the show. Today, when she talked about when you get home as a firefighter, when I get home from work, to be able to say, I'd really like to talk to you about a big call that we had. I'd like to talk to you about something important that happened at work. Do you have the headspace available for me to do that and the actual time to be able to talk to you? Or am I just intruding right now, making whatever I'm going through more important than what you are, which is absolutely not my intention. So that's something that I learned today that I'll absolutely use. And you can thank her later for that stuff. And then second, at the end, when you and Maggie, Steph, were having that conversation about most spouses or partners of firefighters want to make sure that they gave the firefighter exactly what they needed. Just hearing that, it doesn't actually matter what you said. It doesn't actually matter what the response was. It just matters that you're cared for and you loved, and that kind of hit home with me.
Yeah, and some of the things that I pulled out, which was fantastic. It was great to have the conversations with Maggie. I cannot wait for the webinar August 13th, but talking about come together, know your why together. And if it changes throughout the years, recircle back, come back to each other, talk about every year about what you accomplished. Things change. We change. We're not the same people we were 5 years ago. And to really connect with each other and talk about your values, talk about your why together. And that way, when you're in the heat of things, you have that commonality of what that is. So cannot wait for August 13th for the webinar.
Yeah, that was very cool. And Steph, you're going to be doing a couple more of these podcasts with other people and with me too. So get used to that. Get used to that camera in your face. You did a really good job. It was fun to have you on with me. I also want to promote the stair climb coming up on September 7th. That's probably our biggest event of the year. Go ahead and get online. You can sign up. There's going to be a link in the show notes for that too. So, yeah, good to see you. Good to have you on. It was fun to partner with you in this endeavor, Steph. So thanks for being on here with me.
Thank you, honey.